So today we are talking simple self-care habits to distress and feel your best. As you guys know, it is the fourth Thursday. So what are we talking about? We're talking about a moment for self-care because you know that self-care is so important. And I always stress that, you can't flourish in your business. You can't flourish in anything unless you take care of yourself first. So I am so excited. I don't know as you guys know, it's the cool. So let's dive in. So welcome to the bandwidth. I'm Rosie, your video coach, and I help women over 40 connect with their audience and go live. If you find value in this video, give it a thumbs up. Check out my other videos on this page. Subscribe to the channel if you are not already. Hit the notification bell. And that is it, you guys. So let's do this. Let's dive in. Today, again, we're talking about simple self-care habits to distress and feel your best. Our guest tonight is Shanley. I know it's Shanley. I hope I'm saying it right. I know she's going to correct me. Shanley Lewis. She's a self-care and mindset coach. So, Shanley, welcome to the bandwidth.
Thank you so much for having me, Rosie. I'm so glad to be here. I'm really excited for this conversation today. It's going to be good.
Yes, me too. So thank you so much. So first of all, did I say your name right?
Yes. So okay. Shanley, yeah.
Shanley. Okay. So I gave a brief description, but can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background?
Sure. So hi, everyone. So I'm Shanley. I'm a self-care and mindset coach for business owners and coaches. So I support really anybody in the practice of self-care. So support people in prioritizing self-care in their busy lifestyles so that they can serve at their best. I believe that we've all been put on this earth to serve and help others. And sometimes things can get in the way, okay? Doing that kind of job can be very stressful. And often when we are giving and pouring out to others, that can sometimes mean that we forget ourselves or self-care ends up going to the wayside because we can get so busy and caught up in serving others. So I'm there to remind people about self-care and their mental well-being so that they can serve at their best. I'm also a therapist, so I'm a psychological therapist. So I specialize in CBT, helping people to overcome their depression and manage their anxiety. And I'm the founder of Good to Me, which is a brand that's all about supporting busy people in the practice of self-care. So everything's really pretty much all about self-care and mental health, which are things that are important, but sometimes we forget about, or we don't know how to actually meet that need. So I'm your girl if that is what you are all about.
Yeah, so where do we start? Because my target audience is women over 40, and we all have, businesses. Some of us still have 9 to 5 and still doing our side hustle that we want to definitely live off of. So we are so busy. And we know, I always say, Sunshine Anderson, heard it all before because I love music and I always associate stuff with songs. And you hear it all the time. You do need to, take care of yourself. But how do you start taking that time and making self-care a priority?
I think really the first thing is knowing how important self-care is for you. So when we're thinking about self-care is pretty much just the practice or the act of you taking that time out to look after yourself and meet your needs. So firstly, you need to know what self-care is for you, and then really get clear on what your needs are, because again, we're all individuals, we have different needs. So it's really important to make sure that you are aware of those needs. And once you're aware, so for example, if it is that, you your need right there and then is that you're feeling quite anxious, or that you've been tired, or that you're burnt out. That's a need, and that's going to help to direct exactly what it is that you're going to do. Because often we hear that self-care is very much a buzzword at the moment. And we see lots of different examples of what self-care can be. So we try out different things, but the thing that I see happening quite a lot for us is that we're not aware of our needs. So because we're not aware of our self-care needs, we are trying all of these things, they're not meeting our need, and then we're like, nah, forget it, it's wasting my time. So it's really important to be clear on what your need is. Once you're aware of what your need is, then you can create a simple plan to go ahead and meet that. So it's really important to just focus on the need and then create a simple plan in order to meet that need.
It sounds easy, but okay, just like I'll just take myself as an example. I still have a 9 to 5, and I still, have my side hustle that I want to definitely. I don't even consider it a side hustle because it seems like a full-time job.
Full time.
And I'm so overwhelmed. But I do say that I have taken time, because before I used to be really bad. Like, I would get mad at myself for taking a nap, and my body is telling me, you need to sleep. You need to take care of yourself. And it's just, like I said, I used to get mad at myself, but now I try to be mindful of, myself. I try to cut my day off at 11, because usually I get up between 6 and 6:30 and, do it all over again. But I am more mindful about, if I need to take a nap, or if I find myself nodding off, I'm not going to push through it, I will do it. And also I take a ride sometimes. I just clear my head, because I feel like I'm at a point where I can't even do anything else. You know what I'm saying? And instead of trying to push through, I just, now just be like, okay, at least walk around a block or take a ride somewhere. So I am getting a little better. But why do we do that to ourselves? I don't know, because the work will be there.
Yeah, because I love that. I love that you said work is going to be there, and that's really important. And often it's because we've got that, I guess, that hustle mentality, which is very much celebrated in a lot of our kind of cultures and within society, is to really be functioning on that masculine energy and always be on the go and doing something. Because again, if you're not doing something, you're not doing anything. But actually, it's the other way around. If you're doing nothing, sometimes that is actually doing something. So really, it's about us learning how to shift from doing into more being, and actually celebrating that. So it's because of how society has really trained us to be always on the go. We end up becoming or getting into a state of autopilot, right? So we're just doing, and we're not even aware of what's happening. So it's nice to hear that actually you are being mindful, but actually what happens is sometimes we aren't mindful of what's happening. And then that's when we actually we miss out on the signs that our mind and our body's telling us. This is why I talk to a lot of people, and I've been there myself, where I've actually burnt out and I didn't even know it. So, I don't know if any of you have felt so stressed, felt so overwhelmed, and you're like, how did I get here?
Yes.
Where did that, how? Right? You're just like exhausted, out and, down and out, and you're like, how did I get here? And that's because you haven't been aware. You've probably been in autopilot, and you haven't been able to check in to the signs that your mind and body's telling you, because often it tells us straight away, right? We start sometimes getting those physical symptoms, which are usually easier for us to identify, like, headaches, tiredness, fatigue. Then there's again sometimes changes in how we behave. We might become more irritable. We might again start avoiding things, putting things off, those kind of things. So these are the key signs that sometimes we actually miss out on, because we spend quite a lot of time on autopilot. So it's really important for us to actually take that time to ground ourselves to the here and now, into the present moment, check in with ourselves, figuring out what it is that we need, and then commencing with serving ourselves first, and then going ahead and then serving others.
Yeah, because I caught your live. I think you did one a couple of days ago where you finally talked about your self-care journey. And you had mentioned that a supervisor had said something to you about it. And you took it up, you took offense to it at first.
Yes.
And then you had to think about it and then, say that this lady is just looking after my well-being. And why do we take offense to it? Because like you said, we're on autopilot and it's just like, wait a minute, lady.
Because I think really, so that was a really big one, is I took a big offense because, again, at that time, slowing down, it's not normal. However, slowing down needs to be the new norm. Resting is the new norm. Resting is how we're able to serve at our best. So again, because it's something that was very foreign, slowing down meant, excuse me, am I not doing a good job? So that's how we would usually take it. And I definitely took offense in terms of that actually, am I not doing a good job at looking after myself, etc. But really the actual fact was that I wasn't aware of the type of self-care that she was talking about. So at the time, she said to me, Shanley, you need to slow down. You need to really take care of yourself. But actually, I thought she meant, you need to have a bubble bath, a face mask. So I was thinking of the typical self-care that we're, used to seeing, which is usually the beauty side, but there's so much more to self-care. There's so much more underneath the surface. So usually what I like to describe is a self-care iceberg. So at the tip of the iceberg, from what we can see, is we see the beautiful self-care routines and rituals, the face masks, the bubble baths, the spas, massages, all of that good stuff. But actually, underneath the surface, there's so much more work that we need to do. Sometimes that actually involves setting boundaries, managing your time, taking time to reflect, being mindful, forgiving ourselves, accepting ourselves, being empathetic to ourselves. And that's sometimes what we lack, is we are really good at empathizing for somebody else. If we saw somebody, working super hard, not taking any breaks, no days off, work, as Rihanna likes to say, taking no days off, we would be fast to be like, you need to rest, but we find it hard to do it to ourselves. We're always good at being a best friend to others rather than ourselves. So that's another thing that kind of gets in the way as well. And the whole mindset behind self-care as well. It's a whole mindset, and it's not just about strategy and what to do. It's that mindset, knowing that actually I deserve to take this rest. Actually, when I rest, that's when I'm going to be doing my best. When I rest, that's when I'm going to be able to serve others. So much actually kind of goes into it. And that's why I actually really had to learn, and then went on that mission to teach people about, I guess, the hidden language or practices or habits of self-care.
Yeah. So how do you get some strategies from, feeling bad about relaxing or taking the day off to actually in the middle, knowing what the hell to do with yourself because you have worked so hard? You're like, oh, I know myself. So what are some tips to get from here to there?
Yeah. So the first is I would recommend is journaling. So really journaling and writing down out your thoughts in terms of when you get to that point, when you realize that actually, you're becoming burnt out, or you are overwhelmed, or you realize that there's a bit of resistance between you and you taking some time out. It's about actually writing down, okay, how can I serve myself? Okay, how can I serve myself? How is this actually me taking time out? How is that actually going to help me to be actually better? How am I right now compared to how I am when I'm rested? Because a good and simple example of thinking about how you are and how you perform or how you show up when you actually take time to fill your cup up, because again, we can't pour from an empty cup. So we know about that analogy. If we have nothing, if we have nothing in ourselves, we're going to have nothing to be able to give to others. So you really want to get clear on that, what it is like when you actually are empty and how you function compared to when you are full and how you function. So if we think about when you sleep is a very good example because that's one of our basic needs, right? When we don't get enough sleep, how do we function? We're irritable. We don't want anybody to probably talk to us. We're not probably going to want to say good morning to anybody. We just probably want to hide and get on with it. But when we've had enough sleep, when we've filled ourselves up, when we feel rested, we're able to go. We've got that energy. So again, if you haven't got energy, you are going to be dragging yourself through life or through your business rather than actually pushing and encouraging yourself. So what can often happen is we get into a state of, not supporting ourselves. So we actually need to make sure that we are supporting ourselves when we're serving rather than actually not doing the opposite and not supporting ourselves. So it's important to actually make sure and think about actually, how am I filling up my cup? And then if we want to think about, okay, what is it that I need? There's lots of things that you can do. Usually I recommend either getting a self-care assessment, doing a short, brief self-care assessment, or if not, just simply checking in with yourself, taking some time out to be mindful. I've got a really helpful practice that I share with my clients that can help bring you to the present moment if you feel like you're just on the go all the time. And this is called the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. So the aim here is to, wherever you are in your space, is to go around the room and identify and say out loud the things that you can see. Okay, so 5 things that you can see. Then you want to go through and identify 4 things that you can touch. Yeah. After that, you then identify 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and then 1 thing that you can taste. By the time you finish that exercise, you've brought yourself to the present moment. You've slowed yourself down by engaging your senses and grounding yourself to the here and now. And then that's a great time to then check in with yourself, asking yourself the check-in questions such as, what is it that I need right now? How am I feeling? These are really, really important questions. And how can I serve myself right now? Often we're really good at asking other people, how are you? How are you getting on? You good? And do we take that time to just simply ask ourselves? And you may be surprised that actually when you ask yourself, you may notice, actually, I've got this nagging headache, or I'm feeling really exhausted. That's when we can start meeting those basic needs. It's important to start with the basics and then we work our way up to fancy. But once we start getting in tune with the basic needs, such as maybe sleep, water, these kind of things, exercise, these kind of things will actually then help us to actually function at our best. So being in tune with, actually, am I feeling quite low today? Am I just in a funk? Because sometimes if we're in a funk, then we can support ourselves. Maybe we might need to take some time off. Maybe we need to communicate that with, our loved ones around us or our colleagues, etc. Then that can encourage us to actually say, you know what, I'm going to pause for now. Let me go on a walk. Let me do something to shift that energy. So it's really important to start with the basics, make sure that you're checking in with yourself, or do a simple self-care assessment. And that can actually kind of guide you in terms of the different things that you may be able to do for yourself to meet that need that you've become aware of. So self-awareness is key, is very key.
Yeah. And that is great examples that you gave, because I know for myself, sometimes it's just like my body is tired. So I'm going to sleep in.
Mm,
The alarm clock went off, but I really don't, I just have work to do in my business. So
yeah.
I may sleep in, you know what I'm saying? Or it may just be like,
Mm,
today is not the day. Like I am
yeah.
going to not do anything today. And like you
Yeah.
said, when I do that and just take a day off, and most times it's just the rest because you're exhausted.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you just feel so much better the next day. And it's like, oh, okay, let's go. But before then,
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't listening to my body at all. You just push, push, push. But then I learned from others. You hear other stories where people push, 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 they end up in the hospital, different, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh no, I'm not going to go that route. So I've learned to, just listen to my body more. And like you said,
Yeah.
when you first started, you said, you think of self-care like massages and stuff like that. But
Mm,
I never checked in with myself. I still haven't. And that's
mm,
something that I plan to implement
mm.
today. Yeah, starting
That's
tomorrow.
awesome. Yeah, and there's like so much like studies now that show us that actually when we rest, we're more productive. There's a study that says that actually if we work about, well, if we work less, if we're working around about 4 hours within a day, that's when we're actually really productive. So really think about how productive am I going to be if I continue pushing forward? How good am I going to be for others? There's so much research to talk about actually when we rest, we do so much better, especially as females as well.
Mhm.
Um, so much we have to honor, our body, honor what our mind's saying. And we go through cycles as humans, even with our productivity. Every 90 minutes, we have a peak of productivity and then it dips. So I usually recommend for people who are super, super busy and you're like, nah, self-care, what? No. We can try and start including that into your day. So every 90 minutes, maybe put a reminder on your phone for, a few days within the week. Every 90 minutes, take a break, step back, do some deep breathing, go for a walk. It doesn't have to be a long walk. It can be literally 5 minutes, go around the block, come back in, start again. That's being kind to yourself. That's self-care, giving yourself those mini breaks. I think sometimes when we think of self-care, we think that it has to be this huge, extraneous kind of, process or ritual, turn off all the lights. But sometimes it's just taking a break, going to do something, having a call with a friend, watching something funny, and then coming back to the work that we have to do. So being really fair, having a look at your calendar, like actually, am I being kind to myself here? Am I asking too much of myself? So it's about those expectations as well, so that we have on ourselves and rejigging that.
Yeah. And then you mentioned before, like creating boundaries. I know that's a good
Mm,
one. And I know you mentioned before that you never wanted to say, no to anyone. But for
yeah.
me, I don't have I can say no, but it's just I create my own stuff. So can you talk a little more about like the boundaries that you should set
Yeah.
for good self-care?
Yeah. So boundaries are what helps us to maintain a good level of self-care. We need to set boundaries with others, but we also need to set boundaries with ourselves as well. So if you're someone who's good at setting boundaries with others, sometimes we may find it difficult to set boundaries with ourselves. So for example, that can be things like, having a bedtime, knowing when we're going to actually end or start work, things like that. So actually, again, not allowing ourselves to overwork. There's so many different boundaries that we can set. Boundaries are basically being aware of your limits, okay, and being able to communicate and stick to those. Usually a clear boundary that a lot of us are familiar with is, for example, a fence being around a house. That's a physical boundary that we can see. There's a no-go sign, no-go sign. But when it's our own personal boundaries, it's a bit more difficult because they're invisible. So I usually recommend to start off writing down your boundaries. Write down your boundaries so you're actually clear on them. They're not something that's just in your mind. Also, if these are boundaries for other people as well, we want to be clear on them, so that we are able to then communicate them. But simple boundaries that we can have for our self-care is things like protecting our me time. Okay, so if we've scheduled in that me time, if we said this is the cut-off time and now it's time for me to wind down, but people are calling you left, right, and center and asking for help, we can just gently guide them or remind them that actually right now I'm not available, but I'll be available for you in the morning. Obviously, if it's an emergency, we can obviously let that slide. So we need to be flexible with our boundaries. We don't have to be rigid, because I always say that healthy boundaries are flexible boundaries, because sometimes we can get very rigid with our boundaries. And that again is not healthy. Okay, so we want to be flexible with those. But again, we want to really be aware of them so that we can communicate them, and not only communicate them, but stick to them as well. So I find a lot of the time that we have these boundaries, or we might have vague boundaries in our head, but we're not clear on what they are. So it's just not happening. But also another thing is like there's that resistance as well, not only from ourselves, but other people. So we might say, okay, my bedtime's at 9. But then now we're like, but I've got to do this work. So we really need to make sure that we're leading by example. We are taking care of ourselves. Just like you would a child, we have to then go back and parent ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't hear you. I think we lost sound for a minute, so I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. So,
No worries.
so okay, because it went out. It was going in and out.
Oh,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the
yes, that
last
could
thing
be
that you
me.
said.
Yeah, so it was just all about kind of sometimes what can be really difficult is that resistance that we may have from ourselves, but also other people as well. So we might set a bedtime, we might not stick to it, but it's important that we stick to it and we get into the habit of parenting ourselves again. So just like, for example, when maybe we were younger, or if you've got young children, we'll tell them to go to bed at that time, and we'd expect that they follow through. And we need to do that for ourselves, because again, that's how we can look out for our own well-being, by putting these boundaries in place. And that's how we can then maintain a good level of well-being, as well as good level of self-care too. So
Yeah.
boundaries are really helpful in helping you to maintain a good relationship, not only with yourself, but also other people. So really, really important stuff there.
Yeah, it
If you
is.
don't have boundaries, you don't have self-care.
Yes, no, and that's where the integrity comes in, because if you're by yourself and then you don't, take your boundaries
Yeah,
seriously, it's just like, what's the point? So even though you're by yourself, you need to take heed and follow through. So I definitely agree. Yes. So
that's
what's
it.
next for you, and how can we keep in contact with
Yes.
you?
Ooh. So funnily enough, what's next is I have a boundaries masterclass actually coming up really soon. So the best way to find out about that is following me on Instagram. So making sure that you stay tuned with me on Instagram, and you can find me or follow me on Instagram at Shanley Lewis. And if you're also really interested in all things self-care and you're a busybody, then also make sure that you also go ahead and follow Good to Me, which is my brand at Good to Me UK.
Wonderful. I know that our community needs it, because a lot of people are like me. So definitely follow
Yes.
and take some tips, because it's definitely needed. You don't want to be burnt out. So yes, thank you so
Yes.
much.
Anytime.
So that's all, you guys. But before I go, I want to tell you guys that I want you to tell me what you're going to implement from this episode. I shared earlier that I'm going to implement checking in with myself, because I never do that, so just taking the time and just to ask myself, what do you need? And kind of like do the exercise that Shanley mentioned, and see how that works for me. So that's what I'm going to implement. So I definitely want you guys to tell me what you're going to implement so we can hold each other accountable. And also some additional ways, if I can assist, I know we're talking about self-care, but if you're ready to go live, also sign up to get my 3 must-have tools. The link will be below, or you can go to my website and sign up for that. And also, if you are ready to go live, consider my course, The Real Secret to Gaining Confidence and Going Live. It's an online course I created to help women like you show up confidently on camera. You'll walk away being content, camera, and tech confidence. And it will help you build your brand and conquer video. And always remember, your voice needs to be heard because it matters to someone. You can do it. Stop waiting. Start your go live journey now. And if you need me to assist in any way, please DM me on Facebook or IG. So that's all I have for you guys this week. Until next week, bye-bye.